Newsfirst, Newsline.
Hello there, a very good morning and welcome to another edition of Newsline, coming to you live and direct from, this time, a brand new studio here at our Newsfirst head office at Babe Group Street, Colombo. Of course, unfortunately, our usual host Farah Shaukat Ali could not be present at today's show with the opening of this brand new studio. Let's get to know our guest on our very first show in this new studio this morning, none other than Mr. Malinda Seneviratne, political commentator. Malinda, a very good morning and welcome to the show.
Good morning.
So what a time to be a political commentator, and I believe this is the first...
There's always a time.
It's always a time, because the political scene here in Sri Lanka is always happening.
Yeah.
But the speciality is the last time that we had you on this show, we were under a different president. We knew that the president is going to change, and now we are here. The last time you spoke with me, you did sound as if you were in favor of another Rajapaksa administration. Well, they're in power now. How do you feel about it?
I was never in favor of another Rajapaksa regime. I wanted the previous regime out of power. That's not the same thing.
Okay.
Right? When we voted for, when the country voted for Maithripala Sirisena, it's not that they didn't know what the UNP was all about. But they wanted the Rajapaksas out, at least Mahinda out. And you can't, Gotabaya Rajapaksa is showing that he is not that kind of Rajapaksa. So we can't say, oh, he has the same name, therefore he's going to do the same things. But it's just been 1 month, you know, just over 2 days after.
Yes.
And it's too early to kind of pass judgment on things. But yes, we have a new president, definitely.
And some good steps have been taken. There is a committee appointed to appoint heads of state institutions, so on and so forth. However, there is a little bit of a criticism regarding the cabinet of ministers. Initially, it was only 15 ministers that were sworn in, but then when the non-cabinet ministers and the state ministers came in, there was a bit of a booming sound.
There are several things we can talk about. One thing is we didn't need the 19th Amendment to bring the cabinet down to 15 or 16, right? It could be done. It could be done. It takes political will.
It was brought down to actually 30 and 40, which is against 70, which is still, I believe,
yes,
arguably too much.
Yeah, but then it went up again. They had the national government clause, which they used to increase the size of the cabinet. But state ministers, deputy ministers, I don't know about state ministers, but deputy ministers you can have like at least 16. I don't see any reason why you should have more. As I have mentioned before, Switzerland has 7 ministers, and they've been having 7 ministers for the last 70 years, right? And those, it's about delegation, proper leadership, and you know, Damika Pereira has so many companies. He's just one, but then he has CEOs for each of these. So you have to organize your operation, I suppose. But certainly, one of the disappointments, of course, is that we'll look at the names of the people in the cabinet. At the same time, what choice does he have? He has to pick people from the parliament that exists. Now, I was trying to think of at least 10 people whom I would pick if I were president, but
who are clean,
and competent, and I just couldn't find 10. You know, so it's easy to say, you know. But let's see if the next parliamentary elections, depending on the results, of course, whether some competent, skilled men and women of integrity are elected by us, and the president decides to appoint them.
However, Malinda, today's hot topic in the political arena is the arrest and remand of former minister Partli Champika Ranawaka. This was regarding an accident, a hit-and-run incident in the year 2016. You wrote about this as well. How?
I didn't write about this exactly, but then where Champika is a friend. We were in jail together, you know, 27 years ago, and we've been political associates for a long time, at least up to the year 2000. Hit and run is something that has happened in this country for a long time. Right? We were hit and run by Arjuna Mahendran and a different type of hit and run. But we were talking earlier, I mean, we talk before we talk, you know, and Shalini was talking about, you know, what are the priorities Is this the biggest? Of course, if something wrong has been done, the law has to take its course. We are not.
But my question to you is, Malinda, you see,
why
in
this? Why now? Yeah.
Why this? Why now? One question. But in 2015, again, we saw ministers like former ministers like Vimal Veeravansa, Johnston Fernando, a lot of these people, Mahinda Nandalutkamage, going to jail. I mean, there were pictures of them with their handcuffs, raising their hands high up in the air, and asking for cheers from the crowd, if I may put it that way. Yeah. But in the end, there was nothing. It was just at the heat of the moment, right after the election. You know, people are all high on the election victory. These people were arrested. I'm pretty sure they're going to call this another political witch hunt again. But then
I read that he probably be released tomorrow or something like that in one of the papers. But that political culture now Gotabaya Rajapaksa as president has made some very basic but the necessary changes in.
I mean, Rome wasn't built in one day.
In one day, but simple things, no frills, nothing fancy, no pomp and pageantry. Just get the work done, kind of culture. He's trying. But political culture is not just that. It's not just about having your picture or not having your picture. It's about how things work, about processes. And this thing, as you mentioned, putting political opponents in jail is not. If they're wrong, I mean, that's fine. I mean, if you can't just because you're a political opponent and that doesn't mean you're not guilty. That's a different matter. But surely there are some other people whose cases are far more serious than Champika's hit and run. Or whether it's a big crime or a small crime, all
crimes have to be prosecuted equally.
Equally, that's a different story. But one scam people, they're all free. I'm wondering why Champika has been singled. On the other hand, I think this is a blessing in disguise for Champika Ranawaka's future political ambitions. They are just raising a profile. If indeed this is politically motivated, let's not speculate. If it is, and it looks like it is, it means that the current regime sees Champika as its political other. Not Sajith Premadasa, not Ranil Wickremesinghe, not anyone. It's Champika, and they're targeting Champika. Right now, it hurts Champika, but in the long run, I think it will be to his advantage.
But you see, I saw a few posts, a collage of pictures, if you will, of headlines that came out just about a week after the new administration took power. It was all about cases filed against former ministers who are now ministers. Again, people like Johnston Fernando, Udaya Gammanpilla, Mahinda Nandalutkamage, Vimal Veeravansa, people like that. All of them, their cases have been postponed either by a year or so, their passports been released, even Basil Rajapaksa. So is it true that whenever the country votes and a new administration come into power, all their allies get a little bit of a leeway from the legal system of the country?
One thing is, I don't know how the Attorney General works in this. Attorney General's department works, how it can do these things. So that indicates maybe there's political interference, one. On the other hand, were all those people who were arrested by the previous regime actually guilty?
Okay.
Why were those cases not concluded during 4 years? Is a long time. Why were they fidgeting and twiddling their thumbs over it? And if indeed they were politically motivated, and if indeed these people, there's enough reason to believe that these people have been given a raw deal, why should they continue to suffer? That's another line of argument that you can take. But what it boils down to is that our legal system seems to have provisions for all kinds of tweaking. You can go around it, you can go under it, you can just squash it. That is not a good thing in a country. You should have a robust set of laws, processes that someone from up there or down below can't shift around. That is wrong. That is not a good situation to live in.
But then in all honesty, Malinda, when we speak about the legal system of the country, we know that Sri Lanka is a country that has a lot of statute law. So laws are not created by judges. They're written down, passed in parliament mostly. And it really depends on what we expect can only depend on what we put in. I mean, you can't put in substandard flour and substandard butter and expect a good, tasty cake that won't bother you when you go to the toilet the next day.
Right. That is true. Then I spoke to a President's Council, senior President's Council, high-profile President's Council, a few years ago, and he said our system is all wrong. The Roman Dutch law,
okay.
That is all wrong because it ends up making people hate each other for the rest of their lives. Whereas our traditional systems of dispensing justice was, you sort it out. People live together. I mean, not live together in that sense, but they live their lives. They don't become enemies forever and ever, and so on. That is just one aspect of it. But what he said was that these inordinate delays in the system. People are making a lot of bucks. My father used to talk about a lawyer friend of his has become an Iraqi. I said, what? Uncle Raja is an Iraqi. I said, how? What do you mean? He's a Sri Lankan. He lives in Nuwara, former mayor. And he said, well, he's living on dates.
Right, right.
So all kinds of problems with the legal system. But this political culture we're talking about, Champika Ranawaka here, who was been remanded over a hit-and-run case in 2016. To me, first glance, this is politically motivated, and I don't think it's a good thing.
So, to all our viewers out there, if you have any questions that you want asked on this show, you can, of course, send in your questions to the number that's being displayed on your screen right now, and we will provide space for your views and your questions as well on our show. Malinda, getting into a little bit of just one more case. We seem to be discussing a lot of cases, court cases,
you should get
on
lawyers,
our show.
Not
Clearly. But no, this is not about the substance of the case, because of course we can't discuss those matters as the judicial proceedings are ongoing. But from the view as to how it will affect the political culture here in Sri Lanka and across the globe, this is a bit of a global issue. We saw a Swiss embassy staffer right after Gotabaya Rajapaksa got elected coming out and saying, I was abducted, I was forced, I was threatened at gunpoint. But now we find the staffer in remand custody instead of the alleged perpetrators, if there were any.
Yeah. Now I think former Secretary of Foreign Affairs, Palita Kohana, I saw a video where he mentioned that a similar case had taken place in 2008, I believe. Okay. Again, involving an employee of the Swiss embassy, a faked abduction with, amnesty in mind, in application for political refugee status or whatever you want to call it.
Right. So that this incident was in Sri Lanka as well?
This was also Swiss embassy. This doesn't mean that happened, so therefore this also. But just to put things in context, now someone makes a claim. I can claim I was abducted. Was I or was I not? That has to be established. And you have to come up with some substantiation. You have to substantiate your claims.
Evidence.
Where's the evidence? Now, there's so many discrepancies, so many holes in her story, as re-articulated by the Swiss embassy officials, where she was picked up, who picked her up, what kind of vehicle, and so on. The evidence seems to be does not seem to support her initial claim, as articulated by the Swiss embassy. I don't know what she has said. And well, the court seems to have found that this lady has cooked up this story, or there is reasonable evidence to show that she has. So there is suspicion, and therefore the investigation is continuing.
But I believe you reported that the President's Council representing the faction of the victim, in this case, the Swiss embassy staff, alleged that the Criminal Investigation Department and the government agencies in Sri Lanka that are supposed to prosecute the case were treating the victim as if she were the accused.
But we don't know whether she was a victim or not so far. That has not been established from what the Swiss embassy has said. They initially talked about a white van abduction. People saw this. Where are these people? Where is the CCTV evidence? There's nothing. Just what someone says and someone tells someone, and that someone tells to the press. They say we made a complaint. They didn't make a complaint to the police. They went and told the politician. And then the police was moved to investigate. And they said that this lady is, her health is deteriorating. Okay, so she needs to see a doctor. But they don't want a doctor to come and examine her, right? Surely they can get the UN agencies, everyone to be present when some doctor examines. So there can be some. So there were these memes like alien abduction. Why, right? Because it seems like a pure fantasy, like it's utter fabrication, and then she gets some doctor from, they get some doctor from Switzerland to do a Skype interview or something, examine her from a distance. This is just.
But Malinder, this is not just a random incident or, you know, just an internal issue. This is a diplomatic incident. It is, because it involves a diplomatic mission.
Exactly, and we would expect.
How would this affect Sri Lanka? Do you think the government handled this right?
I think they handled it to the best of their ability. What can they do? Yes, it is a diplomatic incident now. You can make diplomatic incidents. America, United States of America makes diplomatic incidents all over the globe. And
but now US has become a diplomatic incident with the impeachment of Donald Trump, of course, right now.
Yeah, they should have impeached all presidents who prosecuted wars, who bombed people, you know, randomly across the globe. That's a different matter. US is a diplomatic sore, right, if you want to call it. Not mincing my words. Not only the United States of America, but United Kingdom too. Right? But yes, now a Swiss embassy, we would expect a diplomatic mission in any country to act with responsibility and not believe, fabricated stories. And they did not go about this in the proper way. They just believed something that someone said. You don't operate like that unless they had some, other kind of agenda on them.
But Malinder, I think President Gotabaya Rajapaksa would disagree with you, because he said that the embassy operated in a proper way, as one of their staffers were abducted, so-called, or alleged. One of their staffers were affected, and they took the proper measures. That's what he said.
I don't know. I'm not Gotabaya Rajapaksa's attorney or media secretary. If I was a Swiss ambassador, though, I had aspirations, but I would go to the police.
Okay.
I would go to the police, and I just because someone told, I don't believe anyone. But if people tell me all kinds of things, I just don't take it for face value, right? Depending on the level of
trust that you
have. But I will always, leave room for maybe this person didn't get it right. Right, and so I never make grand proclamations. I always put the necessary qualifiers to any statement I make. But I don't know everything. So was the Swiss ambassador playing God? He had some kind of, he was omnipresent, he was everywhere, omniscience, he saw everything, and therefore he said. And then he was the world's greatest doctor. He thought this lady's health was deteriorating. What did he see? I don't know. I find it silly. And if it's a diplomatic speak that President Gotabaya Rajapaksa was using to say they acted right, that's his business. I don't have to.
But in the long run, Malinder, do you see this negatively affecting Sri Lanka?
Anything can affect Sri Lanka negatively, but the best that we can do is to be honest and to be transparent about all processes. And Sri Lanka can be bastardized, vilified, whether even if you are saints. Jesus was nailed to a cross.
Crucified.
What I've heard. So anything can happen. I mean, we live in a world that is full of fake news, fabrication. Dictators and warmongers being hailed, given Nobel Prizes for peace and such, and Democrats being vilified as tyrants and demagogues, right?
Malinder, you were speaking about the US. You called US a diplomatic sore.
Definitely.
There was an involvement of the US, or a topic surrounding the United States of America, that played a vital role in the presidential election. I don't think I need to mention the name of the issue. It's the MCC agreement.
Yes.
Also the AXAR and the SOFA agreements. Now, no one in this country is properly sure as to what the progress is on the discussions. We only have statements of politicians to go by. And You and I both know how far reliable those are. We saw the certain members of the government, current government, during the run-up to the election being strongly against the MCC agreement. But now they're coming out and saying, you know, the entire agreement is not bad, 70% is good, 30% is bad. There were some people who came out and said, you know, I fasted against this, but I really didn't know the content of this. And then there are other people who are coming out and saying, we need to still examine this.
That I think was a fake news about,
completely
about the
understand.
fasting, the Buddhist Hamdru,
Yes.
and that he didn't know about it. I think that's a fake news that he did. But anyway, you're right. You know, you say one thing when you're in a political campaign, and when you're in power, you say something else. During the run-up to the election, the two main candidates, the Gotabaya Rajapaksa and Sajith Premadasa, both said that all these agreements will be reviewed.
Okay.
Right. So that, to be fair, let them have their review. Right. I have read the MCC. I find it very troublesome. I don't want the MCC, right? I don't want the AXA. I don't want SOFA. I don't want Americans here. I don't want the Chinese here. I don't want Indians here. They can be here as friends and as tourists and so on. They can invest, definitely. But they can't tell us how we ought to run our country. They can't tell us how we should
sell our lands.
What we should do with our resources, or tell us to believe their version of our reality. Right? That is, if that's what they're doing, I'm dead opposed. I would oppose that vehemently. With respect to MCC, SOFA and AXA, yes, I think that what you're saying is right. We see rhetoric is easy and cheap, but when it comes to action, they should follow up. If Gotabaya Rajapaksa wants to be a different kind of president, and he seems to be interested in implementing his policies, this is part of the story. Foreign relations, international relations, dealing bilateral treaties, all these things should be framed by one thing and one thing only, the national interest and the fate of our future generations. And he can't compromise on that. I would not want him to. I will hold him accountable. Not that I can do much, but to the extent possible, I would say, boss, you're wrong. You know, this is wrong. I would say the same to Sajith or to Ranil. You know, people now, for example, the Sajith Premadasa in his campaign said one country, one law. So did Gotabaya Rajapaksa. Together, they have 95% of the vote. Right?
Everybody wants one country, one law.
Everyone wants one country, one law. You can't have the laws for this community, that religion, this region, and so on. No Tesavalame, no Canadian marriage laws, no Muslim marriage. You can't, you know, let's amend this. Do it away. No special privileges to everyone, for anyone. You take away the, Article 9, take away 10 and 14 also. Do all that, fine.
In all honesty, certain sets of those laws, such as the Canadian law, Tesavalame, Malabar law, are quite non-existent currently.
Yeah.
But we do need an equal standing for everyone. Yes,
definitely. We need to. And I mean, people talk about secular state, they don't put the money where their mouths are, right? You know, if you talk about the holidays, right? The Muslims, if you take all the little the Friday prayers, you take the Ramazan, you take the, if you get your husband dies, the widow's special holidays, divorce holidays, all those things, we put it together, it's more holidays than any other community. Well, except the Christians, they have all the Sundays, right? That's a religious holiday. But let's put that aside, saying that's convention. But still, if you can't have the cake and eat it. But if you question any of these grand secularists about these things, they're just very hypocrites, aren't they?
Speaking on the subject of the United States, of course, we've just got an update that US President Donald Trump has been impeached, becoming the third US president to be impeached. So there were 230 votes cast in favor on the House floor and 197 against.
Well, he might be bailed out by the Senate, but we don't know.
That's the most probable outcome, since the Senate is dominated by the Republican Party.
Yes, I don't know how this will play out in the... Like we have a parliament, 225 members, we have an election result, and the number and the proportions in Parliament don't match the proportions in among the electorate. Donald Trump, the American people will have to decide what his future should be, right? We don't know. I mean, for me, all these things, this Brexit, Boris Johnson, Jeremy Corbyn.
But the entire world seems to be leaning to the far right a little bit.
I think the entire world was always far right. This is the thing. When you have the Republican Party, which is more right than the Democratic Party, you think the Democrats are left? No, they are both on the right side, far right in the political spectrum. The Labour Party and the Conservatives. In Britain.